Hundreds of workers at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, are now laid off. The company said in December it would lay off 1,000 workers. Many of the Algoma Steel employees impacted had already retired, resigned, or are currently on sick leave. The company expected to lay off more employees in the future.
Your support is free, but priceless. Subscribe to Canada Scope. Canada is getting hit with a brutal reality check, and the steel industry is right in the middle of it. Companies that once looked like a solid part of the country's industrial strength are now slowing down, cutting back, and rethinking where they want to operate. What used to feel stable is now turning into layoffs, plant changes, relocation talk, and a whole lot of nervous questions. Workers, local towns, and even people in government seem to be watching this unfold with shock. Steel companies in Canada are not just having a rough patch anymore. From the way this looks, the industry is being pulled in a different direction, slowly but clearly. And that is what makes this so serious. While officials may still speak in calm, careful words, the reality on the ground feels much heavier. Workers are seeing warning signs in real time, and the gap between the official message and daily life is becoming harder to ignore. What really makes this situation stand out is the size of the support that was already put on the table. This was not a small effort. We are talking about roughly $500 million in public support, with around $400 million from the federal government and about $100 million from Ontario. That money was supposed to protect jobs, support the transition, and keep the industry steady through a tough period. But even after all that support, around 1,000 workers at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie still received layoff notices. That is the part that makes people stop and ask a very fair question. If that much funding was not enough to prevent layoffs, then what kind of solution is actually strong enough to protect these jobs long term? And the timing makes the whole thing feel even more intense. A lot of workers were not expecting this to hit so soon. They were under the impression that the transition would move closer to 2028, giving them time to adjust, retrain, save money, make plans, and prepare their families. Instead, that timeline suddenly moved forward by more than 2 years. That is not just a small schedule change. That is a major life shakeup. For workers, this is not just about numbers on a government chart. This is rent, mortgages, kids, groceries, bills, and future plans.
For right now, it's going to take several years to get the diversification of product mix up and running. So it's going to be an impact for a little bit of time, but we're hoping in the long run, we'll have workers recall back to this work.
It could hurt our economy without a doubt, especially jobs.
We knew before the tariffs even were put in place today that it was already causing damage to the steel industry here in Hamilton.
This guy at the top in the States, he scares me because of the repercussions that could realistically appear in a very short time.
It affects marriages, stress levels, retirement goals, and whether families can stay in the same community. When a company changes direction, regular people are the ones who have to deal with the real pressure first. At the same time, the language being used around this situation can feel way too polished. Phrases like changing market conditions sound clean and technical, but what they really mean is simple. Things moved faster than expected, and the system was not ready. That kind of wording may work in a report, but it does not soften the blow for workers opening layoff notices at home. And behind all of this, there is a much bigger force pushing on Canada's steel sector. Trade pressure from the United States, with tariffs on steel and aluminum reported around 50% and auto-related tariffs around 25%, the cost of doing business changes fast. This does not just make production more expensive. It changes where companies think production should happen. The American strategy is not exactly hidden. If companies want easier access to the US market, there is growing pressure for them to produce inside the United States. That creates a slow but powerful pull away from Canadian operations. It is not always loud, it does not always happen overnight. But little by little, the pressure starts changing boardroom decisions. And that is why this story feels bigger than one company or one city. This is about whether Canada can keep major industrial jobs when money, markets, and trade rules are all pushing in different directions. Public support can help, but if the business case keeps shifting south, workers are left wondering whether these promises are strong enough to protect their future. So now the real issue is not just whether one steel plant can survive this round of cuts. The bigger question is whether Canada's industrial backbone is being quietly weakened while everyone is being told to stay calm. And for the families watching their job security disappear, calm words are not enough anymore. Companies do not always move their supply chains in one big dramatic jump. Most of the time, it happens step by step. First, they adjust investment plans. Then they start making new equipment decisions. After that, production.
This is making my stomach churn. The steel industry in North America has always been cyclical. Ups and downs, good times, bad times. And This guy at the top in the States, he scares me.
Some contracts are already getting canceled. If that continues, production could slow, some jobs could get cut, and that could have a ripple effect on the community.
And we've been dealing with steel tariffs in the U.S. since 2018, when they enacted that during President Trump's first administration.
We're hopeful if the tariffs do last as long as they did last time. It was a year last time. We're kind of like wait and see, right? I don't know what we can do to prepare, to be honest.
Why take that approach? Is it because of the uncertainty?
We're kind of in limbo right now. I think everyone's at the whim of what Trump's going to do next.
Slowly shifts, and before people fully realize what is going on, operations that used to be strongly tied to Canada start becoming less important in the bigger company plan. The milestone-based system makes that shift even more direct. Companies looking for tariff relief are not just asked to make vague promises. They have to show real steps like buying land, planning construction, preparing hiring, ordering equipment, and setting up installation inside the United States. So from a business point of view, the pressure starts stacking in one clear direction. Stay outside the US and deal with higher costs, or move closer and reduce them. That is what makes this situation so serious. It is not happening through one shocking headline or one huge announcement. It is happening quietly through decisions that look normal by themselves. A land deal here, a factory plan there, a hiring outline somewhere else. But when you put all those moves together, the picture gets much darker. Canada starts looking like it is reacting after the damage is already moving, instead of controlling the direction from the start. So when people say steel companies are abandoning Canada, I do not see it as one sudden exit. I see it as a slow shift, pushed by trade pressure, business incentives, and long-term strategy. And that is almost more dangerous because slow changes can fly under the radar until the impact is already huge. The warning signs were there earlier, but the response did not seem to move with the same speed as the industry. What surprised me most when looking deeper into this relocation process is that it does not look random at all. It is not just companies waking up one day and saying they want to move. It feels more like a checklist system now. If a steel company wants relief from those heavy tariffs, saying we plan to invest in the US is not enough. They have to prove it piece by piece, and these are not tiny steps either. First, land has to be secured.
One of the main products that we're trying to do is diversification of the product mix at Algoma. And once we get there, then, obviously it's going to take additional workers to come back and do that work. We need to strengthen Canadian industrial strategy and ensuring that no worker is left behind. And I think that's the key. The Band-Aid solution that's going on right now, it's only to stop the bleeding for a short period of time. We need to make sure that, again, unfair trades is dealt with, and we come up with an industrial strategy that will ensure long-term viability for workers in Ontario and Canada.
It doesn't matter what job you're in. I know it always focuses on steel because, of course, Hamilton is a steel town, but it's everything from tourism to just your local businesses.
As time goes on, the steel industry is now saying, we can't keep this up much longer. We're going to have to let workers go. The very industry itself is on the line. The auto industry is making the same kinds of noises. So
then construction plans need to be developed. Contractors may have to be lined up. Equipment orders need to be placed. Installation timelines need to be created. Hiring plans need to be shown. It is almost like the company has to rebuild the factory on paper before the new operation even exists in real life. Every milestone pushes the company deeper into the US system. That is where this starts to feel less like normal trade policy and more like industrial gravity. The pull becomes stronger with every decision. Boardrooms may not announce it in dramatic language, but the direction becomes obvious. One decision leads to another, then another, then another, and suddenly, Canada is no longer setting the pace. Canada is trying to catch up to a game that already moved ahead. When you connect this to what happened at Algoma Steel, the whole situation gets even heavier. Around 1,000 workers in Sault Ste. Marie were hit with layoff notices, and the timing is what makes it feel so harsh. These workers were not expecting this kind of disruption right now. Many believed the transition would stretch closer to 2028, giving them time to prepare, retrain, adjust their finances, and make serious family plans. Instead, the adjustment came years early. It was like the timeline got cut down without enough warning. For workers, that is not just a business update. That is a shock to everyday life. People who thought they had more time suddenly had to rethink bills, housing, savings, and their future in the community. That kind of pressure does not stay inside the plant. It follows people home. And inside the plant, the situation did not sound clean or simple either. There were seniority questions, repeated reviews of agreements, and confusion over who would stay and who would go. That does not feel like a smooth restructuring. It feels messy, stressful, and deeply personal. When workers are trying to understand whether their job is safe, Unclear communication only makes the pressure worse. This is why the story matters beyond one company. The bigger issue is how fast industrial decisions can shift when trade rules, tariffs, and incentives all push in the same direction. Canada may still have skilled workers, experience, and strong communities built around steel, but if the financial pull keeps pointing south, those strengths may not be enough on their own. And that is the scary part.
Well, the Prime Minister is delivering a message on behalf of Canada's steel industry, and it's one of protection. According to Mark Carney, Canada needs to be its own best customer if we want to protect the sector in the face of U.S. tariffs.
Well, an industry leader from the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction says a plan is needed to confront the impacts of the U.S. trade actions on Canadian steel and aluminum.
Over time, we become too dependent on the United States as our biggest customer, with more than 90% of our steel exports going south of the border.
Both the federal and provincial government took steps to try and reinforce the company. In September, Ottawa announced a $400 million loan, Ontario $100 million.
It's quite difficult to make plans around that kind of hostility.
All humans making all these decisions on who should stay and who shouldn't based on seniority, and people are phoning in. We're having to go back and double check our work to make sure that it is based on the collective agreement.
The steel industry does not need to disappear overnight for the damage to be real. It can weaken, slowly, through quiet paperwork, investment changes, production moves, and timelines that suddenly speed up. By the time everyone sees the full picture, workers may already be paying the price. It felt messy, rushed, and honestly, heavy for the people caught in the middle of it. Union voices described the situation as devastating, and that word keeps showing up for a reason. This was not just some cold business move on a spreadsheet. This was real families trying to understand how everything changed so fast, and why the ground suddenly felt like it disappeared under them. And then comes the part that really sticks out, the money. Roughly $500 million in support was involved, with about $400 million from Ottawa and around $100 million from Ontario. On paper, that sounds like a huge safety net. It sounds like the kind of support that should protect workers and give the industry some breathing room. But the uncomfortable question is still sitting right there. If that money was supposed to protect jobs, why are those jobs still being cut? That is where the whole thing starts to feel different. Instead of looking like real protection, the funding starts looking more like a cushion, something meant to slow the damage, not stop it completely. And that is why the criticism gets sharper, because to a lot of workers, this does not look like prevention. It looks like a reaction after the pressure had already built up too much. At the same time, another major force is moving in the background. The green transition. Steel production is already shifting toward electric furnace systems to reduce emissions. In theory, that kind of change is supposed to be planned and gradual. Workers are supposed to have time to adjust, train, and understand what comes next. But when trade pressure, tariffs, and market changes get added on top, that slow timeline can collapse fast. Suddenly, what was supposed to take years gets squeezed into a much shorter period. And when that happens, workers are the ones forced to carry the stress. A transition that sounds clean in a government statement can feel completely different inside a household.
It is an important facility given the uncertainty of the trade environment with the U.S. and the uncertainty around how the Canadian steel market is going to develop going forward. So we're in those discussions with the government. I would characterize them as active, and we're having a good discussion with them.
Algoma will transition to electric arc furnace steelmaking at that time, a year earlier than previously anticipated or planned.
The government is doing what they could do. It's a moving target, and some of the actions that they're taking, they are basically transitional. I mean, it's good to see some assistance for workers, but we need a long-term plan. We need to ensure that unfair trade actions are taken care of. It's devastating news. I mean, we knew it was coming, but to know that it's coming, to actually see the day when it actually comes, it's devastating. We're talking about human beings, we're talking about workers, we're talking about families, we're talking about communities that's now going to be impacted. So
that just got hit with uncertainty. What gets missed too often is that layoffs like this do not stay inside the company. That is not how real life works. When a major steel plant like Algoma Steel gets hit, it does not only affect the workers on the shop floor, the impact spreads through the whole community. Grocery stores feel it, small suppliers feel it, repair shops feel it, transport companies feel it, local restaurants, gas stations, and even small service businesses can all feel the pressure. One steelworker loses a paycheck, and suddenly the coffee shop he visited every morning has fewer customers. The local mechanic gets fewer truck repairs. A small parts supplier sees orders shrink. A family cuts back on spending. Then another family does the same. That is how the pressure moves through a town. It starts with one company, but it does not end there. It is like one big engine slowing down, and every smaller part connected to it starts shaking. That is why these layoffs are not just an internal company issue. They become a community issue. In a place built around steel, the plant is more than a workplace. It is part of the local rhythm. When that rhythm gets disturbed, everyone hears it. That is also why worker support centers suddenly become packed. When hundreds of people show up almost overnight, that tells you this is not a calm adjustment. It is a shockwave. People walk in with resumes, training papers, questions, fear, and a whole lot of uncertainty about what comes next. Retraining sounds simple when people say it in speeches, but for workers actually living through it, it can feel way more complicated. It means learning new skills while bills are still coming in. It means trying to plan a new future while the old one is already breaking apart. It can feel less like a clean plan and more like trying to rebuild the road while you are already driving on it. And emotionally, this is where the story really hits. These are not just positions eliminated.
It would lay off 1,000 workers. Many of the Algoma Steel employees impacted had already retired, resigned, or are currently on sick leave. The company expected to lay off more employees in the future.
Well, our economy kind of hung in there better than expected. This is a slow burn. And a lot of people are getting very concerned about it.
There's a lot of worriness, obviously, on the shop floor, and the people are concerned.
The Prime Minister looked them in the eye and promised he would protect their jobs, that he would negotiate a win, and I quote, have a deal by July 21st, but it was a bait and switch that is costing people their livelihoods.
My team and I have been in contact with Algoma's leadership team. We absolutely have every confidence in the Algoma workers as they're going through this hardship. And we will make sure that we support them as they're developing new products and also accessing new markets.
These are families trying to figure out rent, mortgages, car payments, school costs, food, and everything in between. That part does not always show up clearly in reports, but it is the part people live with every single day. Now, when you zoom out, the bigger picture starts looking even more uncomfortable. It feels like Canada keeps reacting, instead of steering its industrial future with confidence. One crisis appears, then comes a loan, then a statement, then a support package, and then everyone moves forward until the next shock arrives. That kind of pattern starts to look risky. Meanwhile, when you compare it with the United States strategy, the difference is hard to ignore. The US is playing a long game with tariffs, incentives, and strict conditions that encourage companies to move production inward. Companies do not follow speeches. They follow costs, access, pressure, and incentives. That is just how business moves, and that is where the concern gets bigger. If Canada keeps responding after the fact, instead of building a strong long-term industrial strategy, steel might not be the only sector facing this kind of pressure. This could become a pattern. Pressure builds, companies adjust, operations shift, and jobs follow the money. Once that pattern starts repeating across industries, it is no longer just one steel story. It becomes a warning about the direction things are heading, and whether anyone planned it or not, workers are the ones left trying to survive the fallout.